talk about the Institute. What is the People's Institute for Survival in Vienna? I'm a mover, so I'm gonna walk. It's was originally founded in 1980. Two black men, Dr. James Dunn from Yellow Springs, Ohio, and Ron Chisholm, who was from Tremaine. And so these were individuals who had been engaged in their separate communities in organizing. And so then remember we had a lot of organizing in the 60s, the civil rights movement. So then remember integration, not so much organizing. It's almost like we forgot, we thought we overcame. We had no idea what white supremacy looked like. I'm gonna call it like a Hydra. It's got many heads, many faces. And so it adapted well to integration. Not great, but it adapted. It became the law of the land. But as you can see, de facto wise, were we really integrated?
No.
That day, on November 14th, when 3 black girls were in school for those years, showed you that the Hydra had another plan. So it's like you can make integration the law of the land, but you cannot make integration. And here now, years later, we still do not have integrated schools. Exactly. So the Hydra can take things in. So Ron and Jim's thought is that we have to deal with racism at its core and its root in white supremacy is the mother of that. That's the core of the head of the Hydra. And so then this organizing concept that they came up with, they had been doing work, like I said, Ron locally, he's bumping into Dr. Jim from Ohio because they're doing work and going around the country trying to figure out how to raise money for the work that they were doing, how to get training and skills for the work that they were doing. And then one of the things that they recognized, they started going to Saul Alinsky, I don't know if you're all familiar with it, the father of what we call traditional organizing. And one of the things they realized, that every organizing effort in this country is severed by race. We have unions, but we have black unions, we have white unions. We always had a division in this country around race. So it was like Saul Alinsky, on purpose, did not want to take something as divisive as race into the organizing principles. And Ron and Jim went, no, we have to hit this thing at its core, which means we got to talk about race and how it has been divisive in this country. And then we got to talk about culture. And culture they define simply as a way of life. The way of life meaning how do we sustain ourselves? How have we historically sustained ourselves in a world that is not designed to sustain people who have been oppressed in it historically? So the design of the Institute was a multiracial institute. It was designed to bring people of all races together, to organize, they said, from the ground and swell it, to push it up, as opposed to going in at the top. So then this goal is that we show up, always invited. You never see advertisements for the People's Institute. You go to the People's Institute website, but we say that you're organized into a space. You're organized into a space specifically because the people in the space decide how to organize. So the Institute, this concept that was mentioned, communiversity, it was because in its founding, originally, we did not go across the country training people. What we were doing locally, and also Dr. Jim was doing with his organization, Help Us Make a Nation, in Yellow Springs, Ohio, was that you were training the people in the communities to organize. And so that's how communiversity came about. So now we do training. And for us to be trainers, I am a trainer. I've been involved with the Institute since 2016. I also was born about half a mile from here. So I grew up in this community. And I remember the first time I was exposed to the People's Institute. Y'all, it scared this out of me. This is being taped, so I'm not saying the word that it really did, because it really did that. That's what it did. I was like, I work at that time for the Court-Appointed Special Advocates, CASA. As a black woman who was recruiter, trainer, volunteers, most of my volunteers were white. And most of my kids in foster care were black. And so having to pair them, what I noticed was that most of my volunteers seemed like they were there on a rescue mission. And I was like, it's not what we're doing. We're not rescuing people here, especially because systems have created a part of why the people are in here. So it's sort of like, white supremacy has created systems that white people get to show up in as rescuers in. And because they may not be aware of that, the systems created this. They are unaware of the two things and how they're complicit. So then I came looking, and I came to the Institute, y'all. I went to the training, it was over a weekend. Ron actually was one of the trainers. I left going, oh Lord, I gotta still find something. I can't find nothing. Because I knew what he was saying was too dangerous to say at my job. I knew it was too dangerous to train people to talk about the core of something. People were willing to hear about diversity, multiculturalism, about a lot of things. They were not. I knew that, and that was around 2003, 2004. There was no way that we could have had that conversation. So I continued to try to do work. Hurricane Katrina happens. Life happens. I now have a son who I'm trying to get educated in this public school system. He has some challenges. And it dawns on me, what we're doing is not working. I ended up teaching at the university level, bumping into the institute again because I wanted to learn organizing now. Because I had to organize to keep my son in public schools because of the challenges. He was gifted, artistic, and behavior IEP. Every reason you could have an IEP, he had one. So trying to organize to keep him educated, you can imagine if any of you are in the school system. That is a dangerous boy as well, a black boy. That's a dangerous black boy. So then this concept of the institute, and I think about the miseducation of the Negro.
Yes.
And I think of it as miseducation because I think about my son now who's 19 years old. And I think about that if we do not organize something different in this community, in this nation, a transformation of schools is what's necessary. Because I really think it's a miseducation. It's because if you want what we have now, we keep doing what we're doing now. Because what we have now produces this. So it produces people who are not prepared to conquer and take on their own destiny. And so the Institute says, we want to be invited in. We want communiversity. It's because we want the next level of organizing to come out of the communities in which the problems are generating or manifesting, because we know that these things are system level. So then at the Institute, the principles that you see here, these are the principles that we organize around. So it doesn't matter if you've ever been to a training. Sometimes I've just met the trainer when I show up there. It's usually 3 of us, we're a multiracial team. And so we show up, but we show up under organizing principles with what it is we have worked together to do, because all of the trainers organize in one way or another. And this is what I mean by that. When we learn an analysis of race, not just an experience of oppression, but an analysis of oppression, we are then taught to bring that home. You know, like a little roach motel, you like roach goes in, roach moves out, roach breaks in. Everybody gonna die in that story, but we ain't gonna die in this story. We're gonna grow in this story, because what we're gonna do is once we get exposed to this analysis, we bring it back to the places where we rest, eat, sit. So then you become an embodied organizer in your own workspace, in your own family. Because Dr. Kim, you often hear her say, it's hard to organize your family, it's hard to organize people at work. How many of you had conversations around race with your own family? Created divisions, because race is that kind of space where you can have disagreement between parents and children. And so a lot of times, just being responsible for the organization of getting your family this analysis can be problematic. So then this analysis, we center it, we organize around it, we bring it back with us into the spaces, because I tell you, with an analysis of oppression, Nothing you see surprises you. You're surprised by what you see because you do not understand the making of America. If you understand the making of America, you understand the making of race, you understand that it was intended to divide and set up one group, pit it against others, divide to determine who to be enslaved and not enslaved in this country, and that then is embedded everywhere. When you look at what we see in education, in hospitality, name a space, you understand the Hydra. And so then now you understand we've been playing with tentacles. And so you know you hit a Hydra, you don't hit him in the right space. He's still going. And that's what's been happening. And so then the Institute creates an analysis so that we understand if we're going to organize what we have to take down in community, multiracially, together. Together. How do we understand power? Sometimes Ron is still alive. Dr. Dunn is transitioned. And so I see Ron, he's 80-something years old, and sometimes I look in his eyes and I think Ron thinks he's done nothing. And I say Ron has done everything. I say that because he was having a conversation about white supremacy, not about integration. Early enough, he and Dr. Dunn, that a lot of the work you see done now, the work I do, the work Ron did, we do this work on that foundation. That he was having complicated conversations before it was sexy to have complicated conversations. And so you can look back on a lot of the work now. A lot of it is principled on things that Ron and Dr. Dunn were talking about way back in 1980. We went through the Reagan years and Reaganomics and all of that when nobody was talking about this because we had integrated and we could send our children. Like I went to Tulane University, and so that we could do things we forgot. Ron did not forget because they were doing an analysis. So they were clear that you have to develop leadership. Now you see the gatekeeping thing is interesting because in the civil rights movement we marched. We were out there. We had no idea what the hell we got in here. See, the quest was easy. Change the law to let us in. We had no idea that once you opened the door and let us in, how to dismantle it from this side. So that has been an awkward strategy for all involved in the work. But I will say that MAGA, is it MAGA? Make America Great Again? Many of those things are now drawback because the work that has been happening was beginning to be too successful. Because it was playing in the land of power. I can let you in the building, but if you get dancing around power, which is really what the secret is, now we really got to start having another kind of conversation. This pushback is because many who have been out there organizing in schools and other places, they're dancing with power now. And that's really was what they was hiding. It was hiding power. And so then this gatekeeping, that's because now we, people of color, could be inside the buildings operating on behalf of white supremacy. And so gatekeeping means you can get in there, you got the power, you got that individual power to decide who you're going to serve, who you're not going to serve, the quality of service, how you're going to do it. So as individuals, even though we operate in systems, that gatekeeping, the concept at the Institute is know and analysis so that you can, with that power you have, and I tell people if you got a job description, you got power. Because I don't have any power. You got a job description because they ain't paying nobody there. Not to have some measure of control, some measure of decision making. You're the janitor, you got the keys to the building. You're the janitor, you get to determine if the bathrooms are clean or not. You're the receptionist. I have been places, having my own business. I tell people that. Decided to have my own business meant I kind of became working poor. And so then I qualified for Medicare when the state of Louisiana did it. And I tell people, I couldn't wait to not be on Medicare. Not because something was wrong with Medicare, because the way we treat poor people in this country. See, I was rolling. That's why I got to do stuff like this. So, and close, The Institute is here as a partner because the work that is being done, we recognize there is so much more work to be done. And we know that that work happens seated in you all. You all. And so communiversity is going to be designed to teach from this level down, working up, so that children are armed with an analysis to help push the needles in schools. So that we know we have great teachers like you to go, we need, wouldn't it be great if the students also knew what they needed? So then you're working at a gatekeeping level with some decision making at the policy level and the children now demanding something different. What could schools look like if children understood that they were being miseducated and on purpose? What could it be? So thank you all. Let me grab mine.